Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you for joining us for this session of the webinar that we have with a Q&A. Inshallah, we will be starting shortly. And this session is a Q&A session. So inshallah, you can participate. Just to start, you can use the Q&A option, which is at the bottom of the screen. This is live, so just like a warner, it is live. So if you do want to ask questions anonymously, then you can take benefit of the anonymous option in the Q&A. And if you want to upvote a question which you think is good as well, which you'd like guests to answer, then you can also do that with the like button, hopefully. So before we start, just like to kind of present a little something if I can. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is, I actually don't remember which webinar this is, but I do know we had Andrew on our very first webinar. And I remember at that time I was, we were just starting off and we weren't really sure of what the response was going to be. And we had a huge response of people saying, oh, this is beneficial, this is helpful. And, you know, it was almost, I don't know if Andrew remembers, I was even thinking, what medium is it going to be? Zoom is going to be Facebook? I didn't even know at that time what was happening. Probably quite disorganized at the start, I would say.
Handled it like a pro, I think. It sure seemed like you were doing it already. So.
Oh, did it? Yeah, you didn't know.
You fooled me.
It was very much the guinea pig in things. So no. So for those who are interested, they can see that first ever session, which was called Trends in Therapy, and Andrew went through, you know, kind of really good presentation, which is in there, on different types or different modalities or different approaches which are available. And we had an extensive Q&A after that, probably because we had quite a lot of people on, and it was probably the first time we were there. And I had a lot of feedback saying, oh, get him on again, this is really, really good. So you know, I'm very grateful that Andrew can spend the time today with us again to answer some of that. And I've already had one or two of you speaking about the webinar before, and hearing your questions. So hopefully we can get those addressed. For those of you, just to kind of introduce, Andrew has been working in this area for a number of years now. And I think for me, in particular, I've been following his YouTube channel, Psycho Bible, which he continues to post relevant. There's so much kind of which is now going on, isn't it, around sex and gender, and it seems like it's there's something new every day, which is kind of, you know, it's at least for me, I've seen that on Twitter or something, there'll be something new every day, because it's no longer something which is, I think in the past it used to be kind of US centric, You know, in the past, it used to be like, oh, okay, so there's a bunch of therapy which is kind of available and people are doing it. But now I think there is a global kind of understanding of it. There's global understanding of, you know, kind of what sex is, what sexuality is, and it's I guess from a positive light, it helps. It's broadened the conversation, and that's definitely what we've seen. That even with strong support, it's not just people in the UK. It's people globally who are you know, addressing, contacting this, and inshallah today helps in the measure of that we can provide some of the support and the assistance for people in that. Um, so yeah, that's I didn't want to take too much of time because I know people don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from Andrew. But I have a question just to get us going, and it was something which I had planned to ask but never got around to. And how is it that you kind of entered this work? You know, like what was like the journey like? And because it's not something that most psychotherapists would want to work with this population. So yes, I'd love to hear more about how you got into the field.
Okay. Yeah. That's actually a bit of a story. So, I've always been kind of had a curiosity or an interest in these sort of issues. And I remember as times as a teenager just doing some reflection, like, why do people develop same-sex attraction, or what? And I remember, like, as a teenager, I was thinking it's got to come down to something to do with their identity and their masculine identity, not understanding who they are as men at some deep level. So I had this intuition about it at a young age. And so there are also some other things in my personal life, my family life, that contributed toward me being interested in this area. When I was like junior high age, my aunt left her husband, which was understandable because he was pretty abusive. And they always fought. Everyone in the family knew, okay, they have a terrible marriage. So it wasn't surprising that she left him, but then she left him for her lesbian neighbor. And so she was in a lesbian relationship for several years. And so our family was like the one who sort of stood out as the ones who weren't going to affirm that. And so the rest is my dad's side of the family. The rest of the family was all affirming, and they were just like, go along with it, just support them. And we're like, sorry, we're not going to do that. We stuck to our guns on that. We still, loved her, but we weren't going to be supportive. But eventually what happened is she came to recognize that it was wrong, and she repented of it. She then became what we say in Christianity. She became a born again believer, and she dedicated her life to Christ. And it was like a radical change for her. So now she's right where my family was at the time. And so it's kind of funny seeing that the tables turn. The people that are all liberal and supportive of her are now the people that she will tend to get into maybe some arguments with, or she'll correct them if she sees them posting stuff that's supportive of LGBT things. So it's funny. We just stuck to our convictions, and then she ended up repenting at some point. Mm-hmm. That was throughout junior high, senior high. That was one person in our family. Then when I figured out I wanted to be a therapist when I was a sophomore in high school. I just wanted to be an artist. Like, if it was up to me, from as soon as I could hold a pencil, I was drawing. Mm-hmm. And I was into comic books. I thought for sure I was going to be a comic book artist. And then in my sophomore year, I was a homeschool student. So in high school, you take different classes with other homeschoolers, and then like once a week, and then you do your homework and you come back. So what we call co-ops or homeschool groups. And so in junior high, or no, sorry, my sophomore year of high school, I took at one of our homeschool groups, I took a course on psychology. And I was like, oh man, I love this. This is great. In a way, I already was kind of like a counselor at home. You know, my older brother, he had a lot of emotional issues, and he dealt with a lot of rejection and loneliness and depression. And so in our younger years, when I was more in elementary school, I was like his soundboard. He would talk to me a lot. I'd listen. And we sort of grew apart a bit in junior high, but then, but I had that background. I was like, I had a desire just to listen and try to help. And then with my parents, when they thought I was like the peacemaker, I would jump in. So we often joke that my parents were my first clients. Um, so when I discovered psychology, I'm like, oh, I love this. I love figuring out how people work, you know, what makes them tick. And so I was thinking, well, I want to be an artist and I like psychology. Why don't I marry the two? And my plan was to become an art therapist. And I thought, you know, it'd be cool to be an art therapist and I could work with kids with trauma backgrounds. So that was my plan. And where I was living in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And so there's Lancaster Bible College. And so it's a local Christian college. And they do this program where you're a junior and senior in high school, you can take one free course per semester. You just got to pay, like, back then it was like $70 for the credits. So that way you graduate high school with some extra college credits under your belt already. So since I already knew I wanted to be a therapist, I took some college courses there in psychology. And they were both with an adjunct professor who was also the director of Seven Ministries, which was at the time one of the member ministries of Exodus International, so the Christian counseling center that specialized in sexual issues. So he taught theories of personality, and then I took another course he taught on how to do group therapy. And I was like his teacher's pet. I was like a senior in high school, and I was like his best student. And so all the other students were, you know, recognized that about me, and they're like, Andrew, what's the answer to this question? They come to me after class and ask. So he took to me, and he was like, he spoke to me after class a couple times, and he's like, what do you want to do after you graduate high school? I'm like, well, I want to be a therapist. And he's like, all right, good, keep at it. So I went to Valley Forge Christian College to study my just study psychology. And I chose a Christian college because I wanted to make sure I had some theology as well as psychology. So with Valley Forge Christian College, every student, at least at the time, did a Bible core. So they had enough Bible classes to equal like an associate's in Bible. So I wanted that, wanted some theology courses. And I was in the honors program there. And so we did some special honors classes like debates in science and religion. And so I was like that guy who I studied the sexual disorders. Like, these are the things I want to know about. So I was studying things like sexual identity disorders, the gender identity disorders, the paraphilias. And I wanted to figure out, all right, how do we approach these theologically and when there's conflicts over these issues. So I was always interested in that type of stuff. And what also happened my freshman year were a few things. I didn't know anyone at the school, so they put me in an apartment with a bunch of guys, which was cool because I got to meet a group of guys that way. But my roommate, it became apparent that he was dealing with some same-sex attraction, because I would come back to my dorm sometimes or in our room, and I'd see him with a friend, and they're like laying in the bed together in a strange way. They weren't making out or anything, but I just see them laying in bed. I'm like, two guys laying in bed together. And they'd be like, yeah, Andy, what's wrong with that? I'm like, just a little weird, guys. You know, I'd say something like that. But I wouldn't really confront my roommate about it or his friend. And I just felt intimidated to talk about it with them. And then the spring semester of my freshman year, my older brother came out of the closet. So, or rather, like, my parents pulled him out of the closet. They had suspicions that he and his roommate were more than roommates. And so they asked him about it one day, and he admitted that, yeah, they were boyfriends. And so he figured, well, I'm out, I might as well be out. And so that was that was a difficult experience for our family, and it wasn't one of those things it was saddening, but it wasn't too shocking. I could go back through my brother's history and I see a bunch of the things I see in a lot of other guys' lives.
Mm.
And you know, I don't want to get into the details because it's not my story to share
Mm.
those things, but there was a lot that I could trace back. So it wasn't too much a mystery about how his same-sex attraction developed.
Mm.
Um, and I just tried to love him. I had one conversation where I confronted him on it, and really most of it was just asking him, like, you, uh, how are you justifying this? Because you know better than this. And he told me at the time, I'm just doing what feels good. I'm like, okay. He didn't want, because he knows what scripture, and he tried going to like a gay church for a while, but he just knows like this isn't compatible with Christianity. So I think he just sort of swore off his religion. And honestly, I would rather that than try to distort scripture and distort our faith. I'd rather just, all right, if you're not going to follow it, then don't follow it. All right.
Mm.
I'd rather you come back when you're really repentant and really ready. So he's someone I'm constantly praying for. Um, so that happened my freshman year. And there's just a lot of situations at the school where I had a friend who was struggling with like pornography, just heterosexual pornography, and he came to me and we became accountability partners. I had another friend who was friends with my roommate at first, and so he started coming to both of us for accountability, and which is kind of ironic because his roommate was struggling with the same issue. I had my own history throughout high school of struggling with lust, with compulsive masturbation, and so that was something I had to surrender and work through. And really, my breakthrough was in my senior year of high school, really making progress in that area. And um, really, it was through my understanding my identity in Christ as a believer, and understanding that there's no shame that I need to keep holding on to, because through Christ, God gives us forgiveness of our sins, but He also begins a process of transformation. And so that those are some basic truths as a Christian that I held on to, and that helped me work through my own struggle with lust and pornography. It's still, there's times it still is a struggle, but I made a lot of significant progress in that area, so that the compulsive masturbation was
Mm.
no longer an issue by like the end of my freshman year of college. So yeah, I just had all these guys coming to me with different issues. And then my sophomore year, I started dating the woman who became my wife. And she's a music major, and she had a lot of friends in the music department who were clearly dealing with same-sex attraction. But this was a difficulty at our school. It's a Christian university, a Christian college, but we had no counseling services on campus. And so the way they would deal with issues, because they had a code of conduct they expected students to abide by. You had to sign off that you're going to agree to them. Like, there's some strict rules, like no radar movies, things like that. But also they expected no pornography, no acting out sexually with someone you're not married to, and no homosexual behavior.
Mm.
So you go in understanding that that's the conduct expected of you. It's going to follow biblical principles. But they didn't have any counseling services. So if anyone was struggling with these issues, the way the school dealt with it was to discipline them and just treat it like a sin issue and just punish them. So I I had some friends that were more mutual friends, or rather, like they're my acquaintances, but they're more friends with my wife and her friend. And so I wasn't getting to know them that well yet at this point, who were struggling with this issue. So put that off to the side for a second. My after my junior year, it was time for my internship. And so what I do, I'm like, well, I'm going to contact my old professor who encouraged me to go into this field. And since I know he's the director of a counseling center, I'm going to pull some strings. And so I got to do my internship at Seven Ministries,
Mm.
and which was a really special because they usually didn't take undergrad interns. So usually just graduate level interns. So I got to
Mm.
intern there while working my bachelor's, and got to work in the recovery groups. I got to do a couple of initial interviews. And the recovery groups were really awesome because they were combined, both guys with just heterosexual sexual addiction issues and guys with unwanted same-sex attraction. And to see them working together, encouraging each other, holding each other accountable, praying for each other, really displaying the uh, the acceptance and affirmation that they needed was so, that was so special to me. So I did the internship the entire summer, and then I come back to school, and I'm now faced with these situations with these friends of my wife's, or my fiance at the time, and who are dealing with these issues. And interestingly, one of the guys who was friends with my wife was dealing with a situation in which the same guy who was involved with my roommate freshman year, they sort of broke things off at some point, and that guy was now involved with this friend. And the friend was this guy who was a student a couple years prior, but because he acted out homosexually, the school had kicked him out of they kicked him out of the school.
Mhm.
So he was back at the school, but he was under probation. So they allowed him back, but they're like, if you act out again, you're in trouble. And so he was involved with this guy. So he was like, oh, he got scared. He realized, oh my gosh, if I get caught, I'll get kicked out of the school again, and they won't let me back after this. So he got scared, and so he tried to cut it off this guy, but the guy kept pursuing him. And I'm like, it's the same guy who was involved with my roommate freshman year. So I'm hearing this story through my wife and her friend who told me about it. It's not because this guy shared it with me. So I'm like, don't tell me this stuff. I don't know him like that. But God told me, he's like, freshman year, you didn't do anything. You didn't speak up. This time you're going to do something. So I'm like, all right, God, what do you want me to do? So I spent a week in prayer. And at the end of that week, another friend of ours who was part of like a prayer group we were involved in came to me and shared that he struggles with homosexuality. And now we're at the end of the fall semester. And that's where God made it clear, you're going to start up a support group on campus for guys struggling with same-sex attraction. I'm like, okay, all right, now I know what you want me to do, God. And it was clear as day, this is what God wanted me to do. So that meant that I was going to have to go and confront these guys, let them know that I know what's been going on, that there was my wife's friend, his roommate, who they weren't involved together, but I knew they both struggled with same-sex attraction. And then there was the guy who was involved with my wife's friend, who was previously involved with my roommate. And so there was those three guys I knew I needed to talk to. And I was going to talk, I figured, let me talk to them, and then I'm going to talk to Student Life and tell them my plan to start up a support group and see if I can get their approval to do it. So first I go and talk to the guys, and they're like, one of them was like, no, yeah, sure, I struggle with that, but it's not a big deal. You know, I already got a friend I talked to about it, but it was a friend that he confessed to that they both like each other. So it was like, that's not a good combo. You're both being accountability partners, but you both are attracted to each other. That doesn't sound very wise. So I'm like, okay, man. And I talked to the guy who was really involved with my old roommate's old partner. And he was terrified. He's like, he did not want to say a word to me. Because he was worried that I was going to rat him out. I'm like, man, I'm not going to rat you out to the school. I'm trying to offer my help as an accountability partner if you want it. And he was just real apprehensive. I'm like, my plan is to start up a support group. Do you want to join if I start it? And he's like, I don't know. He was real scared. And then I go and confront the guy who was involved with my old roommate. And he admitted to it, but he was like, it was no big deal to him. He had a girlfriend too. So he just kept the stuff secret from her. And so he tried to say that, no, I'm working on it my own. Everything's fine. I don't need your help, Andy. And then I go to my old roommate and I break the ice with him. Like, man, I got to talk to you about something that we never talked about freshman year. And he opened up to me and he told me he's been getting mentoring from one of the professors who's a pastor. And so I'm like, all right, man, but if you ever want to join the group I'm going to start up, let me know. And I'll let you know when I start it. And then I go to Student Life. And this is where we butt heads, because the head of Student Life did not want me to start a group up. Because his mentality was, if we have a support group that guys can go to for these issues, then how will we punish them? That's his mentality. And he was like, and if you start a group up, if any of them confess to breaking any of the rules of the school, you're gonna have to report them to us so we can discipline them. And I'm like, that's not gonna happen. That's not how counseling works, or there needs to be confidentiality. And then he tried to tell me that, well, there already is a support group on campus. I'm like, really? None of the guys I'm working with are aware of that. He's like, yeah, there's a professor who runs one. I'm like, well, will you at least get me connected with him so we can work together? And he's like, yeah, I'll let you know. And that was the end of the semester. So then during the winter break, I go back to day 7 and tell them, here's the situation I'm dealing with. I want to start a support group up. And so they gave me some extra training in how to lead a group. And they told me, hey, if you want anything from us, we'll help you out. We'll bring one of our therapists there to help do a training or something, or speak to the student life department. I'm like, all right, cool, I'll let you know. Come back in the spring semester, I contact head of student life because I'm like, hey, you never got back to me during break. You're going to give me this information about this professor. And he started beating around the bush, and he tried to confront me. He was like, he didn't like my attitude. Yeah, he thought I was being too confrontational with him. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to advocate for these guys. I'm trying to get them help, because like, I met with him again. I'm like, how many guys actually go to you to voluntarily to confess they struggle with this issue? And he's like, not many. He admitted. It's like, they only come to us when they get caught. Like, so you know how many other guys struggle with this issue, but they aren't acting out? It's just in their mind, you know? And yet they're discouraged. They don't know that there's any help available. And you guys, they're sending them to, they sort of outsource for counseling. There's this Christian counseling center in the area that they're sending people to. And it's actually where I ended up working for several years in the office staff after I graduated. It was called Life Counseling. But the thing is, life counseling, like 30 years ago, was a Christian counseling practice, but they grew to the point where they no longer were a Christian counseling practice. So the school was sending people there thinking that they're going to get Christian counseling, but sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they were getting someone who said they were a Christian counselor, but was giving them gay affirmative therapy. So it's like, you can't even trust this place you're sending the students to. And I'm like, why don't you even have counseling on campus? And he's like, well, we used to back in the early 90s, but then the students committed suicide. And so our lawyers told us to not even offer counseling anymore. And I'm like, that's just a risk that happens, man. You can't just stop offering help. So we really butted heads. But eventually he told me who the professor was. And the professor was just a music prof who had students who confessed some issues to. And he was just an accountability partner to a couple of them individually. He didn't have a group running. And so he saw through the email chain, he got CC'd on one of the emails, and he saw our conversation. He saw my heart. And his heart really broke, because he's like, he saw how I was getting the runaround. And so he's like, let's link up. So we met up, and he had a group of guys he was trying to reach, and I had my group of guys I was trying to reach. And he sort of knew them because some of them were music students, and he was a music prof. So we're like, how do we get our group of guys together to make one group? And he's like, I don't know. They're real apprehensive about starting up anything. So I contacted Day 7. I'm like, let's have one of the counselors come here to campus and do a presentation on sexual addiction and homosexuality. I'm like, all right, let's plan it. Took a while to plan it. I got it sponsored by the student chapter of the American Association of Christian Counselors, but it didn't come together until like the end of the spring semester. And so finally I got this thing together. I was going to have one of the counselors come down, and I had like just a few days to promote this thing. So I make a flyer with the details, but then I'm like, I got to make this flyer provocative. I got to get people's attention. So I had two versions of the flyer. On one flyer, it said on the side, come out. And the other flyer on the side said, who wants to talk about sex? So I'm like, these will get people's attention. So I bring the student life. This secretary puts her stamp on it. And so I make a bunch of copies, and I post them all over campus. But then the student life department sees them, and they're like, why do we approve this? They don't like the flyers, too provocative. So they start tearing them down. So they tear down the flyers, and I post them back up. We're going back and forth. I just have a few days to put this thing. And they're like, you got to change the wording on that. That sounds too controversial or whatever. So I'm like, too late. But all right, just in the email you sent out, can you just remove that part of it? So I removed that part in the email and sent out the information. Well, after going back and forth, having this war with student life, 100 students come out to this presentation. And more importantly, the guys I was trying to reach came out. And after they hear the speaker, they're like, all right, we're ready. We want to work on this. So me and this other professor, we launched a group, but it was kind of underground because we still don't have approval from the school. So we met on our own, met off campus, and for about a year we were doing that. But then what happened was the school had a ministry already that was running for girls who were dealing with a past of abuse. And so it was like an abuse recovery program. And they had sovereignty, meaning like student life didn't require that they report anything to them. And then they had privacy and confidentiality. And so they wanted to start up a support group for guys just like that. And it was called Moving On. Basically, they took the girls' curriculum and they just changed the pronouns around to be for guys. It was really just a lot of devotionals. It wasn't very clinical. So I was about to graduate, or actually I was graduated by this point, and I heard about them doing this group. And so I volunteered to be the leader for it. And because my wife was still a student, she still had a couple more years left. And so I'm like, I'm still living in the area, but my wife and I live off campus. I want to leave the school in a better place than when I found it. So I volunteered to be the leader of that group. And so I started that in 2008. And it was just a group for guys dealing with pains from their past. But every school year, half the guys were dealing with sexual addiction and the other half were dealing with unwanted same-sex attraction. It was just, that's the way it worked out every school year. So I ran that group for 8 years. And about half, so I started 2008, 2012 is then when I started my master's. And then when I finally completed my master's, then in the interim, around 2010, day seven, or sorry, not day seven, Life Counseling, the place where I was working after I graduated, I was just in the office staff. They were mostly a secular practice, but they had like a subsection of counselors that were Christian counselors. And so what they were doing is they're offering their Christian counselors at different local churches and stuff. And they wanted to bring that same program to Valley Forge, my college. And the old president was really giving them a hard time, but finally they convinced them to allow them to offer counselors on campus. So it wasn't until like 2010. In a way, what I did with starting up my support group kind of helped blaze a trail in a way to make the school more open to allowing counseling. And another good thing was after a couple of years of me starting that group up, the leadership in the student life department changed. And so they're way more supportive of the work I was doing. Like I used to have to keep it real secretive that I was running this group, or that the group was addressing homosexuality as one of the topics. But the group, the church, the school became way more supportive. They started referring students to us. So thank God, the student life department really changed. So anyway, once I got my master's to the end of 2016, I contacted the school. I'm like, hey, I've been giving you guys free counseling for years. Why don't you hire me? So that's how it ended up becoming the campus counselor at the university. And then also Seven Ministries, where I'd done my undergraduate internship, they had started up, they were in Lancaster, which is over an hour away from where I live now. But because I used to live in Lancaster when I was growing up. But once I got married, I moved closer to the school. So it was a little far, but my dream was always to work for Day 7 again. But they opened up a branch that was closer to where I live. So once I got my master's, I was like, hey, can I work at that branch that's closer to me? They're like, awesome, we'd love to have you. So I ended up working at Day 7, but I just recently resigned from there because now I'm the director of another counseling practice now. So it's closer to where I live. Yeah. So that's the long story of how I got into this field. It's just through people in my life, just making it an issue that I was sensitive toward and I wanted to understand better, and friends at college where I just wanted to be a support to them, and then just putting in the work, just trying to make the campus where I was at and the church in general. I wanted church culture to change, to be one where people could talk about this issue without shame and condemnation. So I tried to always tell the guys in the group, guys, this is a microcosm of what church should be like. So I want you guys, once you graduate from here, take this with you and start up groups like this on your own and try to be like this with other friends where you can be a safe person that they can talk to. So
yeah, no, thanks for sharing that with us. And it's I've never I haven't heard this before, if the viewers are wondering, and it's amazing. And I always find people who are in this type of work have, like yours, have a great story in which family, I mean, it's family being hit, it's like from what I'm hearing, and then also friends. And then I really like the part where you're saying, okay, I'm getting that clear message from God saying, do something about it, because for a lot of us, they're like, so you could have picked a lot of things to go into, why this? But I think from your community and experiences, this was almost like, if I don't work on this, then my community is extremely suffering. My family suffering. My friend circle is suffering in this, and yeah, and I really get that sense from your work, the videos, that it's something that you feel really strongly about, as in, it's something that that really resonates, as in almost like it's fulfilling some type of purpose for you, which is really great. And like what you're saying, you're able to complement your belief system and your value system with what you're actually doing at work, which a lot of people can't. This is definitely a luxury to have that. So yeah, and amazing, absolutely amazing story in terms of um, how little things like the internship or the meeting the professor for the support group, and how those little pieces kind of join together to to get you to where you are today. So
Yeah,
wow.
it's just amazing how it all comes together.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's useful to get perspective on things, because a lot of people sometimes look at it and they're like, okay, so why are people so passionate about this? Why is this something? And with the um, current difficulties of people who are practicing in this, I always find that the people who are practicing in it is because it there's a huge value, or almost like a life mission, which kind of speaks to their work. So yeah, brilliant.
The school is like the mentality, or the way it was treated was almost like a don't ask, don't tell.
Mm,
It was like, because there was no counseling available, because there was not a very redemptive approach to the issue, there was guys who were clearly dealing with same-sex attraction,
mm-hmm,
but no one would talk to them about it. And it was almost like the cool thing to have, like, your friend with like the gay friend.
mm-hmm,
And so, like, guys, if you got like that guy who's struggling with homosexuality, or he's dealing with it, like, that's your opportunity to be a support to that person if they want it. Like, I don't believe in forcing anyone to address this issue if it's not ready to. But you don't know. Maybe you're not. Maybe they're just waiting for someone to ask them, "Hey, man, is this an issue you struggle with? Do you want any help with this?"
mm,
And I want to. I care a lot about this issue because I look at it as being consistent with our values. And if we're claiming to say that, as Christians, if we're going to say that homosexuality, or homosexual behavior at least, is a sin, then we have an obligation to also provide help for those who want the help. Otherwise, all you're doing is just telling them, hey, this is wrong, and you're going to leave them feeling kind of like feeling guilty and ashamed and hopeless. So compassion is to recognize the truth, but also provide help for those who want it. Not to just like say, oh, it's okay, no big deal. But like, no, let's take it serious. They're really struggling with this issue. See if they really want the help, and learn how to provide really good, effective treatment and help for them and ministry.
mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. If you really care for someone, you're not just gonna affirm what if they're sinning, like, and if they're obviously if they're in the faith community, you're
Yeah.
going to try and help them in a sense. And so there is the level of care is, if I have a good friend, then my friend tells me if I'm going wrong, right? Or I have a friend who doesn't want to tell me that I'm going wrong because they want to avoid the confrontation. And obviously, we prefer friends which are open and honest with us.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so
And not just tell you that you're wrong, but then be like, I'm going to help you fix this. I'm going to help you work through this. I'm going to help you walk through this struggle. And that's tough work. I
mhm,
think a lot of people just they don't want to do that type of work with their friends, so they'd rather just be affirmative because that's the easier route to take. All right, just accept it, embrace it. That's easier
mm,
to take. I think that's the cop out in a lot of ways. Instead of, you know what, this is a really tough issue, and at the same time, it's also wrong to give into it. So I'm going to help you wrestle with this. I'm going to be there as your support. That's what I consider being my brother's keeper. So I take it very serious. Like, if you want me as your friend, okay, I'm going to be your friend. Like, that means I'm going to tell you the truth, and I'm going to stick it out with you. Like, I take friendship serious. like if you just want someone to tell you what you want to hear, that's not me.
That's fantastic. No, and we should aspire to be like that. Conscious of time. So no, in terms of the Q&A, so just to remind the viewers which are with us that they can use the Q&A option. If you do want to speak, you can also raise your hand, but just be aware your name would show for that. But if you are comfortable to do that, you can do that. So there's like a raise hand option, which you can use for that. There's one question which is already here, so I'll start with that. If that's okay, Andrew, or if you wanted to start with Q&A, or are you happy with that?
Let's see, we got a question in the Q&A already. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're ready, yeah, we can.
Yeah. So the question is, how can a boy who suffers from SSA from his past or father neglect or abandonment and hating himself and never getting to embrace his masculinity and has had no male friends, how can he get rid of this, right?
That's a really tough situation, but that is very common. That is sort of like the main version that we see of development of same-sex attraction, at least coming from the developmental model that we use in the approach I'm learning with Joseph Nicolosi Jr. and Sr., based off his dad's work. So I would first say it's not a matter of getting rid of the same-sex attraction, but more a matter of fulfilling it. Because and what I mean by that is there's every guy, whether they've had same-sex lust or not, they're totally heterosexual, totally straight. Every guy in his development needed or has a same-sex attraction, meaning an attraction to someone of the same sex, but it doesn't always get eroticized. So what we're longing for is that connection with men that accept us, men that are salient, meaning that they represent the ideal that we want to emulate. And so with a dad who's salient would be a dad who is perceived by the boy as strong, powerful, but also good, benevolent. He's not just all powerful in that he's mean and harsh and punitive, but he uses power and his strength to be caring and kind and fun. So we enjoy our time with him, and so we have a connection with him. So a dad is like that we most want to emulate, and we bond with a dad like that. So it's a matter of actually fulfilling that desire for connection with men who are like that. So we all have that desire. It gets eroticized when there are multiple factors, but in this situation, it's clear that based on the developmental model, that the one main contributor is they're not being that connection with the dad. And so there's that longing for connection with a salient male that went unfulfilled. And then hating himself makes you think that this boy was also shamed quite a bit for different things. Could be because he didn't develop masculine traits. And so maybe he was bullied by his peers. Maybe he already has a very sensitive temperament. So different types of rejection or perceived rejection really impact him a lot. And he didn't have male friends. So it wasn't, the masculine identification didn't happen through other means. So yeah, the counseling journey will be kind of multifaceted. We're going to want to develop that bonding with the therapist, make that the safe relationship where you can just explore these issues. We want to do a full assessment to check for any other disorders, any other concerns. For example, with the Breakthrough Clinic, I do a lot of work with, or I do consulting with Joe Nicolosi Jr. through his Breakthrough Clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And we do like a whole array of assessments. We check for just your mental health. We check for depression, social anxiety, sexual compulsive behavior. And one of the main things we're checking for is OCD, so obsessive compulsive disorder. What we find is a lot of guys with same-sex eroticization or same-sex lust are also dealing with some degree of obsessive compulsive disorder. And so that contributes to the obsession over, am I good enough? Do I measure up? Am I being rejected? Am I being accepted by these guys? So it becomes obsessive. And then that contributes then to the compulsive behavior and oftentimes checking. So a lot of times the desire to see a man in a sexual way is a desire to check and see if I measure up. So we want to check for some of those things. I can go into that more in depth. That's probably the greatest thing I've learned from working with Joseph Nicolosi. So in general, with the course of therapy, we're going to check for some of those issues. So we're going to look at, okay, what are the fantasies? What is the lust that you're experiencing? And then do the introspection with that and approach it in a mindful manner, meaning like you're going to pay attention to what you're experiencing when you're lusting. And take a look at what are the emotions that you're experiencing. There's going to be the lust, there's going to be the arousal and the attraction. But what else is going on? We want to develop a mindful approach to this. And oftentimes you'll see, well, there's a longing to fulfill those unmet needs for male connection. That's probably the most common thing we see. There may be other needs as well. Maybe it's more specific, like, well, not just connection, but a specific type. Like, I really want to be admired by another guy. I want to be chased. I want to be pursued. I want to be wanted. I want to be praised. So it might get really specific. And then we connect that, okay, when do you remember really desiring that? When was that not fulfilled? What memories come to mind? So we go back to those early experiences that contribute to that desire. And we do usually some form of trauma reprocessing, so such as EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or image transformation therapy, or just mindful self-compassion, where you just visualize yourself giving compassion to your younger self when you go back to those early wounds. So that's one approach we take, is addressing those early wounds of rejection, abandonment, of alienation from other boys, from other men, and reprocessing those memories. And there may be a whole bunch of memories and it may take time. But also it's going to be in the context of a trusting relationship with your therapist. And that also takes some time to develop. So I'm not one to rush that process. I want to make sure that there's trust established. And also encourage taking that chance of building connection with other guys now. We can't exactly go back in the past and redo all the stuff that we wish we could have had, but in the present, we can find a couple friends that we can start to share and be open with. And sometimes that takes a while. It takes a lot of courage to start that process. Like, I got one guy working with for a few years at least, and he finally opened up to one of his friends that he he's like, this is a safe friend. I know he'll be accepting, and he won't also be gay affirmative, but he'll honor my worldview because he's also a pastor and he knows where he stands on these issues. But I also know he'll be caring and he'll be sensitive and compassionate. He knew that, but he still was scared for quite a long time to disclose that this is a struggle he has. But he finally did it, and he realized, oh gosh, we had to do a lot of work to get him to there. Like, all right, where's that fear coming from? So, there's, as we start the journey, a lot of things may come up, but you want to try to get a support system. That's what I love about having strong support, that you've got a community right there that you can go to. Issues grow when they're kept in secret. They just get worse. And a lot of guys I work with, they try to just deal with this on their own. And they think, okay, I'll just go to therapy and then I'll get cured. They have this idea, this expectation, they'll just get cured. And then I'll get married. And then I'll act like this was never a problem for me.
Mm.
And it's oftentimes just kind of a fantasy to think that way. So I'm not saying you rush into sharing this issue with others. You want to be careful, be judicious, make sure the person is a safe person who shares your worldview about this issue, but is not going to shame you or be harsh with you if you struggle with this, but it's going to be accepting and also encouraging you to keep going. So the main idea is there's a deep need there for that genuine, authentic connection with other men.
Mm.
And it's not that you get rid of that desire, it's you fulfill it by healing the wounds and by meeting that need in healthy ways in the present. So
Yeah,
I just use that as a launch pad to sort of share the course of therapy in general. I hope that answers the question.
That's been really descriptive. And I think the question is definitely a classic example for, as you say, the developmental model. And I know I've had that type of thinking as well. When I started, I was like, okay, I'm going to book some therapy in. It'll be fine, get married, and then, and it's, I remember one of the therapists telling me, this is a lifestyle change. This isn't something which is you're just going to do for 2, 3, 4, 5 years of therapy, and then it's going to be gone. It's going to be something you need to address,
Yeah.
And then when I heard that, it was like a massive blow, because I was like, what? You've completely changed my perspective of, kind of what this is. I thought this is, because, when we deal with things, we think of it as short term. And then I remember thinking, well, if I've thought a certain way for God knows how many years, it's not just going to take 2, 3, 5 years to suddenly change those experiences, or kind of my coping mechanisms, or my the way I deal with things. And I think there's a huge surrender piece almost in that saying, okay, I really like the fact that you said all men have SSA, because they do have SSA. All men are attracted to other men because of some feature or the other. And for a lot of us, whenever we are attracted, we think, oh, it's because of our disposition, or it's because of this. And
why do you think boys like superheroes
I know.
or athletes and sports stars? Like, my favorite superhero since I was a little kid, before he was in the movies, was Captain America. So since like age 3 or 4, he was my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, I had things in common with him. I love my country. I could relate to him because I had asthma. Steve Rogers had asthma, and then he got the super soldier treatment and became this powerful man. I'm like, yo, I want to look up to that. So kind of like this, so it's just, there's something about him that I want to emulate. That's just a natural thing. Like, boys want to find a guy that they can relate to in some way, or they desire to be like. And that's same-sex attraction. It's now, we use same-sex attraction as a short term for same-sex sexual attraction or same-sex eroticization. But that's what happens when that genuine, like, God-given need for connection and the genuine, authentic attraction to other guys doesn't get fulfilled. It becomes eroticized.
And that's what we say, that the need in itself is a legitimate need, the need to connect, and it's just coming out in a way which is eroticized. And that's why for a lot of the population, it feels like you're born with it, because it's a legitimate need. It's not something which is, it's not just like, you can't really equate it to, oh man, I'd really like to eat a chocolate cake. It's not, it's not a want. It's a need, and because the need has been sexualized, uh, then that which makes it difficult for people to kind of say, oh, I'm, and even in, my journey, like speaking of myself, it's like I used to say, hang on, but my SSA isn't gone, because I'd look at men and say, there's still some attraction there. And then when I was thinking, well, if I didn't have this and I was attracted, would I still be attracted to that man? And I was like, oh yeah, I would still be attracted to that man. And then it made me question, okay, because we like to play the victim card, and we like to, you know, put the scapegoat on it and say, oh, this damn SSA, this damn same-sex lust is keeping me from everything, and I can't get rid of it, and so on. And yeah, I think so much of the work is taking that perspective, and then looking at it, and then getting, like you said, having the awareness of what those attractions and what they're actually saying. So yeah, no, thanks for that. Just to mention another comment we had before this webinar, someone asked me, I think they contacted the um, uh, Nicolosi Junior Clinic, and he was telling me about his success with HOCD. So that he went to a therapist. I think, couldn't get on to, because he was based outside of US, so it was difficult for him to get the therapy. But he went to a therapist, and they addressed HOCD, and HOCD is something which is not contested, right? So it's something which is,
phenomenon
like
that secular therapists recognize.
Yeah.
And actually, while you're talking about that, give me a second. So one of the tools we use with guys with the OCD is the mindfulness workbook for OCD by John Hirschfield and Tom Corboy. And I love this book. It's excellent. I recommend it for clients with OCD, as well as just general anxiety and phobias as well. And the author is a guy with a history of OCD, and the John Hirschfield, and then Tom Corboy is a therapist that he ended up working with, who was like an expert. And so it combines using mindful techniques with cognitive and behavioral techniques as well. So the first part of the book is just the basics, like how to use mindfulness, how to understand OCD, how to use a behavioral approach to the compulsions, how to use a cognitive approach for the obsessions, and how to use mindfulness, combined with all of those things. So there's just really good foundation there. Because I'm telling you guys this because if you do get this book, if you do have OCD, most of the time what I find is they'll skip the beginning and go right to their chapter about homosexuality OCD. And I'm like, and then they won't understand it, because you need to read the first few chapters to understand the rest of it. Because the second part of the book is getting into specific types of obsessions, like responsibility and checking OCD, or harm OCD. Then there's HOCD, which is also called sexual orientation OCD. And this is the thought with that is, the obsession is, am I gay? Am I gay? If I found this guy a little attractive, does that mean I'm gay? And do I measure up? So there's a lot of that obsessive thinking. And then the compulsion is, well, let me watch this gay porn to see if I'm really gay. And then, so oftentimes there's a mix of genuine same-sex eroticization and OCD. And we find that the techniques we're using in reintegrative therapy are not going to be very effective if we don't deal with the OCD first. So a lot of times I'm working with guys just through this stuff first. Let's work on that OCD for a bit, because we try to work through the trauma or that might be causing the attractions, if that's the approach we're taking, we're going to hit a lot of snags. We're not going to really get very far in that work if we don't deal with the obsessive thinking and the compulsive checking.
Yeah.
That has to be worked on first, and that could take a bit of time. But
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's so important that a lot of us take that identity so quickly, isn't it? It's like, oh, because I'm aroused by watching at pornography, gay pornography, it means I must be gay, and we take that, I don't know, like at very, very early, as early as we're exposed to it, we would take the identity on it. And someone, I guess, with OCD would probably obsess over it, and in that. And whereas for a lot of us, it's not. We've, I guess, across the board, we take the identity too quickly on, whereas we don't realize that, for sexuality is fluid, sexual attractions are fluid, they change. And even though they have changed for us, we still keep to the identity. Yeah. So I think for clients which actually don't have the attractions, but they have the obsession over the attraction, then yeah, and it's you and it's I guess it's difficult for the therapist to ascertain that if the client's already labeled themselves, or they've brought it as an identity. Yeah. um that one's done. This next question, on so this is the same individual. He's based in Canada, so he's wondering how to get help being based in Canada.
Ooh, Canada is definitely, it's going to be tougher. I know there probably are counselors out there. I don't know them too well, if there are any, or I mean, like, I don't know too much about what's available in Canada. I know there's a lot of opposition to this type of work in Canada. There's just more and more legislation that's being passed there to ban this for everyone, not just for minors. But a lot of the work I do is remote.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm not available, contact the Breakthrough Clinic, and Nicolosi's practice has other people that are in his practice that he can refer you to, or other associates like myself that he does consulting with who could take the case. Like, I'm seeing guys all over the planet right now at this point. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Australia, France, like there's UK. I got guys all over. So that's the great thing about telehealth. We can get you connected with someone. It might not be someone in person. So that's the tough thing about it. There's way more opposition growing these days, especially after last year the UN presented their findings on conversion therapy. I don't know if you remember seeing that. And it was just a terrible report that they presented. So now all these countries are like adamant that they're going to start banning conversion therapy and anything they could consider conversion therapy. If it's doesn't even matter what approach is taken, how professional or ethical is being done, because they threw in all these horror stories. Probably there are some genuine horror stories from like third world countries, and maybe some fundamental religious approaches that just use aversion and pain, and yeah, maybe that's still out there, but not in developed countries. And so they didn't make any sort of distinction, even though I was part of a group that provided information disputing the conclusions that the investigator was coming to. But no, so it didn't matter. You get all these countries now that after that report at the UN last year that are vowing to ban conversion therapy. So the opposition is growing for this type of work. It's sad. So If you're looking for someone in person in Canada, that's going to be really difficult. You might not have to travel to the US, but you might be able to do things remotely. But if you are looking for someone in person, at the very least, what you can do is discuss it as a sexual struggle, or if there's an OCD component, work on the OCD with the therapist. If there's trauma background, just go to a therapist for trauma therapy. It's really what are the root issues that you can identify. And if you really want to see someone in person, find someone who can deal with those root issues that you know of, that you believe are contributing to it. Worst case scenario, you learn how to deal with your trauma, or you end up having tools and make progress in dealing with your OCD. So you'll be better for it either way, at least.
Fantastic. I'd like to remind people that they can raise their hands. I see Brother Mustafa has raised their hand. So, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mustafa. I think you're on mute at the moment. I'm wondering if he's
okay. Perfect. Hear me now?
Oh yes. Okay. Brilliant.
Oh, okay. I'm so all right. Hey guys,
Hello.
I'm glad to be now with you because just Andrew now just said something that I kind of experienced. I mean, I went through is that he said about the therapy about that going to a therapist, like just trauma therapist, because this is something I went to, because I live in Poland, and despite the fact that Poland is still a country where, still not that did not ban any conversion therapy, but it was really difficult to find a therapist who would, help me with my same-sex attraction. So I basically went to, and this is really funny because I went to a pro-LGBTQ, therapist. I mean, before I texted him, I didn't know that he's a pro-LGBT, so he would be one of the therapists who would confirm, the gay identity. So I before texted him and told him, would that be possible that I believe that my same-sex attraction has to do with my sexual abuse and physically and emotionally absent father. And so he told me that no, that would not be possible because there is no scientific evidence for that and stuff like that. So I said, okay, then I'm not going. But after that, I decided, okay, I'm just go, and I want to, deal with my trauma and just not to. I mean, well, if he's gonna ask me about my sexuality, I'm going to tell him, but I am just going to go to him just because I want to, deal with trauma. And so I went to him and we talked through it and my sexual abuse and all stuff and how I view myself. Of course, I told him that I do not feel masculine, that I feel that I do not measure up because these are all I was feeling. So we went through this, and honestly, my homosexuality diminished, because I basically I just we had that talk where he just was telling me why I should feel like masculine, what happened to me that made me feel less of man, and of course that was all my my sexual abuse and stuff like that, and some comments I had during the school, like bullying stuff and stuff like that. So So yeah,
I'm glad that you're able to push through that challenge with that therapist and just be like, all right, we can at least work on the trauma.
yeah,
And
exactly.
he disagrees with my worldview or my perspective. Well, and that's a hurdle to get through because you might have had some difficulty connecting with the therapist, but this was, so that took some effort on your part. That took a lot of courage.
Yeah, I
And
mean, yeah, go ahead.
it sounds like you reaped some benefit from it. So awesome.
I did. Yeah. I did a lot actually. Because the only therapist I knew that would be possible. I mean, a friend told me that he went to a therapist, but in Italy, and I live in Poland, so that would be really hard, But I said, all right, so if if homosexuality and my same-sex attraction is a symptom, of stuff that happened to me in the past, like the sexual abuse and many other stuff, then all right, so I'm gonna go to, a therapist and just do my trauma, And actually, this really worked so good that I don't know. We actually did the MDR, therapy.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, and I don't know. Honestly, it's just
Your therapist inadvertently did reintegrative therapy.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something like he's as I told you, he's pro LGBT, so he's not like he wouldn't do that, but we wouldn't. He did ask me about my sexuality and stuff like that, but all I said that okay, I'm dealing with it. I'm not sure yet. I don't know. So we actually focus just on trauma and my self image, and yeah, since that is just I had after therapy, and that's funny because I was prepared to have like 5 years therapy, 6 years, and I was like okay, let's do it. But the thing is that I start feeling changes after 2 months, because I had kind of, I don't know if that possibly with therapy, but I had one time when I remember I wake up and I was doing something, and I just something like hit me, that what happened to me is that not who I am. It's like these guys who told me like I'm not masculine, and this is not true. This is not true anymore. Because I am I'm grown up now. I am strong. I am masculine. And it's just like I don't know, but it just something hit me, and I was like, wow, and I really started crying that day because I was so kind of shocked, like what's going on. It just so
thank you for sharing, Brother Mustafa. And I think it's you're highlighting the fact that a lot of the times people ask me, what is this therapy? Is it some exotic therapy? Is it something which is off the wall?
Yeah.
And it shows that we're using standard therapeutic methods, and the only thing which is different is the direction the client wants to go in. So it doesn't, the methods, so if someone went to therapy for EMDR for another reason, they would be allowed to do that, as you've kind of witnessed that.
Yeah.
But if your reason was, I want to explore my masculinity, I want to look at the wounds around my masculinity, then that's suddenly something which is not catered to, but you're using the exact same methods as you've described. Thanks for sharing that. Was there any question in particular, or was that something you just wanted to share? Because I know, and Andrew mentioned trauma.
And actually, I just want to say, to you and to Andrew, that I'm grateful because, because of Ali, I knew that there is a community who's, there's community that believe that change is possible, and through Andrew that I knew all my drum, because I'm a huge fan. I watch all videos, and I'm like I work stuff like I saw where is the problem that I had, that I was able to go to a therapist and talk with him through it. So yeah, thank you guys. I'm really, yeah.
Well, thank you
Because
so much. I think your story, and if you don't have a question, that's fine. What you shared, I think, is so important, and you really illustrate something at a point that anyone can do the therapy for this issue. It's just a
yeah,
matter of getting your agenda out of the way and letting the client steer the direction of the counseling. And all right, if there's a root issue of trauma, just deal with that. Don't have a
yeah,
don't have a stake in the outcome as a therapist. Just let the client work on the root issues.
yeah,
So
definitely. And you will just, what you will feel is just like you will have no reason to be attracted to other guy, you know. And now I'm like, I swear, like my my, you know, my attraction, you know, to same sex, it just like, I wouldn't say like it disappeared 100%. It is there, but it is, you know, no more has an power over me. It wasn't like before, you know. I was before having the feeling of, you know, I need, you know, like I need something, you know. But now I'm like, you know, I'm 100% have control over it, and just by, you know, dealing with trauma. And yeah, so I also
excellent.
want to, yeah.
No, thank you so much, Brother Mustafa. And you know, it's really nice to hear, because sometimes I feel like I'm the only one kind of like saying it, and then you know that it isn't some crazy type of conversion therapy that this is. You know, it's standard practice. EMDR is used for a whole host of things, and I think that that's really important. And I think we're so grateful to say, and I think it's almost in the first, you see the most change in the first few months, isn't it? Almost in a sense that you would.
You should. I mean, if there's something blocking that, there may be a disconnect in the relationship with the therapist. So there's some sort of resistance going on, or there's, like I was saying before, OCD could be one of those things that really makes it challenging. But if OCD is not as much of an issue, then you should start to experience at least. There's a couple of techniques we use. The EMDR is one to work on some of the more deeper issues underlying the origin of the eroticization. But there's also some techniques we use just to help with coping with the attractions when they come up in real time. And so we use more of a mindful approach with those things. And the idea with that is just to pay attention to your experience and pay attention to, okay, if I'm attracted to this guy right now, what's going on mentally? What am I thinking about myself in relationship to this guy I'm attracted to? What am I feeling? Get in touch with your body as well. One thing that's oftentimes a block is a lot of guys just are not in tune with their bodies and their emotions. So we do a lot of emotion focused work. The more someone can get in touch with their emotions and their thoughts and see how they connect to the attractions, then they can see they have some degree of self-mastery or self-efficacy in handling those issues. And so that should be something we start to see earlier in the sessions. Like, I was able to handle it. The attraction came up and I was able to think through it. And I saw when I was done doing the exercises, the level of attraction at least went down a little bit. Interesting. You know, so that's something we see early on. So yeah, it shouldn't take years to see any sort of benefit. But if there is, then there's got to be something to figure out with the therapeutic relationship or the approach that the therapist is taking.
I mean, I know old psychoanalytic theory would ask for long years of it, but obviously the approach has changed a lot since then. The next question is, I guess, a question we get quite a lot. What is success rate for someone with SSA to fully, in quotes, recover from therapy? Is there any potential or of harmful effect on someone who takes this therapy?
All right, so the first question, the success rate, I don't have a more current stat. There's been one of my videos gets into it. There's different success rates. It's of, and depends what you mean by success, because may you still have to deal with some level of attraction throughout life? Probably. Like, I wouldn't go in expecting that to be the standard or the criteria for therapy being successful. Like absolutely no more same-sex attraction and only ever having opposite-sex attraction. Like, that's just it's pretty unrealistic to make that your criteria for success. So there's different markers of success that we can use. So level of distress over the attractions, level of shame over the attractions themselves. It's ironic, but one of the greater things you want to work on is actually reducing the shame over the attractions and come to a place of accepting that you have them. Not accepting as an embracing that as your identity, but accepting that this is an experience I have. And so it might seem like that's counterproductive, but it's actually one of the most beneficial things you can do. So we want to see a reduction in the shame and the distress over the attraction experience itself. That would be one mark of success. Another mark would be how competent you are in coping with the attractions and not going into compulsively acting out. So your level of self-mastery is going to be another area of success to use for measurement. And then there's the attraction itself. You look at it as two different scales. Degree of same-sex attraction and degree of opposite-sex attraction. So for some guys, they may experience a reduction in frequency or intensity of same-sex attraction. Very often I hear, it's like, yeah, so I get the attraction. It's more, but it's more like a gnat. You know, they compare it to like a housefly that bothers them. It's not dominant. And that means that they've gotten to this place of a real mindful approach to it, that they recognize, and when I talk about mindfulness, one of the principles of mindfulness is to understand that your thoughts are just your thoughts. They're not demands, and they might not even be accurate depictions of reality. So a thought and attraction only has significance if you choose to give it significance. So when you become fluent in a mindful approach to this issue, you can get to the point where, yeah, sure, I have the attractions every now and then. I find a guy attraction. I might get a little arousal here and there, but it's not that big a deal anymore. It doesn't bother me that much, and it's more faint. It's not as like glaring in my head, and like, oh my gosh, I got to do something about this. So that's oftentimes the experience I have here of guys who've made significant progress in this area. So the same-sex attraction may go down. Remember, it's all in a continuum. This isn't strict categories of gay, straight, bisexual. It's matters of degrees. And these are experiences. This is not your identity. The attraction is an experience you have. So we may measure success by how frequently or how intense you experience same-sex eroticization. Okay? And then, all right, to what extent do you experience opposite-sex attraction? So some guys may see a reduction in the SSA, but not see an increase in the OSA. And that may not be considered a success to some, but might be considered a success to others, because like, okay, at least it makes it easier for me to live as a single guy. I'm not as stressed over my same-sex attraction. I would say there's still more work that could possibly be done to potentially increase the opposite-sex attraction. A lot of times it's working through fears that we have. A lot of anxiety about relating to the opposite sex then needs to be worked through. So anyway, rates. We have some general rates from different studies. If you're talking about complete change, like complete reversal of attraction, that is very rare. We're talking like in the 20 to 30% success, at least based on the past studies. There is a study that should be coming out later this fall, study that we've been working on for years, or I shouldn't say we, I wasn't working on it, but Carolyn Pila, one of the past presidents of the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice, started this with Joe Nicolosi Sr. It was a longitudinal study of 75 participants in Joe Nicolosi's clinic. He died partway through the study. So it was a 5-year longitudinal study. Almost near the end, he passed away, unfortunately. Joe Jr. continued the work. So they still got 75 clients, continued the work, and then they measured their progress. And it was also important to answer your second question simultaneously is they were checking on what was the level of same-sex attraction, level of opposite-sex attraction before starting treatment, and also what was their mental health levels, like were the levels of stress, suicidality, anxiety, depression. And we wanted to see, because one of the claims is this therapy is harmful. Okay, that's one of the assertions from our opponents. So we want to be like, all right, is it harmful? Let's test. Let's measure their levels of mental health and stability prior to doing the treatment, during treatment, and after treatment. And the preliminary results, I think I was at one of the Alliance conferences when Nicolosi was presenting the halfway results, and he's like, so far we're seeing that the same-sex attraction is reducing, and the level of distress, the suicidality, the depression is also reducing, and higher levels of emotional stability and elevation, mood elevation are increasing. So that was at the midway point. And since the study's been done, it's been done for a few years at this point. It's just been tough to get this study published because of all the opposition. This study went through a lot of revisions, went through multiple submissions. Peers will review it, give their input, and they'll rewrite it, and they'll address all their concerns. So Carolyn was telling me, in the end, she's like, it's a very strong study. We addressed all these concerns, but then people would back out. The journals would back out and not publish it. So I was getting updates from her about, when is this study being published? I've been waiting on this study so I can finally be like, here is evidence that this treatment is effective and beneficial and not harmful. But she's like, the results show that it's been helpful. So finally, it's going to get published. It wasn't from one of the journals we wanted to get it published from at first, but it's still something. We're shooting for one of the more prestigious journals, because we can always publish it through the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice, but we wanted one that people will get more access to and they'll see it more. So
that's really good news. I have been speaking to Caroline Pila, and I've been saying, when is it due? And each time I speak to her, she's like, oh, it's almost there. It's almost there.
Yeah.
So it's so would you say in 2-3 months time?
We're looking at probably October.
October, okay. That's really great news.
That's inside info. I probably shouldn't even share that.
That's the first.
Probably said too much. But Carolyn keeps telling me, give me updates. Joe keeps giving me updates. It's something that we've all been like asking about. So it's not like it's a secret that the study has been done. Yeah. It's just the question is, when is it going to get published? So I forget the name of the journal, so I won't tell you that much. But it should be sometime this fall. We've been eager to get this out there. There's going to be good, solid evidence that it's going to be really difficult for people to dispute it, because it's been through a lot of peers already who've given their criticism, and those criticisms were addressed. So it's a very strong study.
There has been previous studies, hasn't there? Forgot the name. I think there was one in 2007. It's just gone off my head. I think there was one also on the Atlantis report. Published.
There are some. A lot of the previous studies, though, weren't prospective. A lot of them were retrospective.
Okay.
So they don't have as much weight.
As in, they've not been following the client throughout.
Yeah, meaning like they didn't test the client before treatment and then after treatment. A lot of the studies were people who are already gone through treatment, and then they're asked questions about their treatment that they've had.
Retrospectively, okay.
So, which still it's meaningful, but it's not as
scientific as a before and after. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and also the funny thing is, a lot of the studies, well, all the studies that are used to criticize this sort of therapy those were retrospective too. Like the Shidlow and Schroeder one, that's based off retrospective data from people who said they did the therapy on average 12 years ago. So it's like, how good is their memory? You know, it's not, they're talking about it like it just happened. Anyway, I don't want to get into that because I got a video you can watch that gets into the criticism of that Shidlow and Schroeder study. It's insane that's the main study cited and used by the APA to denounce this type of therapy, and that different states are using to use as justification for their therapy bans. But it's really shoddy research. So if they really want a definitive answer, is this effective and is it harmful, then they should have been clamoring to do a study like the one that Carolyn has been doing.
Right.
And the fact that there's been so much opposition shows they really don't want the truth. They
and
want
this
propaganda.
is the frustration, like the UN document or any other document isn't backed by a study, or it's not backed by, you know, when they say, okay, this is harmful, and then they'll either link to one story or like a media, you know, like a media outlet story. And the frustration is that, okay, you know, if the LGBT community doesn't want this therapy, fine, don't have it, you know, but if you ban it, you're affecting the people who do want that support. And surely it would make sense to speak to those people who would, you know, and you would normally find them in, I don't know, religious settings, or you'd find them in, you know, you have to kind of look at what that setting is, isn't it? Yeah, so it's almost like, you know, the audience is biased. And even in the UK, they say, oh, we did the LGBT survey and it said, you know, so many people had conversion therapy. Well, they don't define what conversion therapy is. So it could be anything from, you know, something illegal.
Conversation. The stuff they count as conversion therapy is ridiculous.
Exactly.
Just talking to someone like on the street and telling them that you think homosexuality is wrong. That's conversion therapy. Like the stuff they count is so ridiculous.
And even the UN definition is so problematic because it says it's an umbrella term. Well, how can you put corrective rape and licensed professional therapy in the same category? And yet they do with, you know, with the statement. So it's, and I think that's what, we mentioned Canada, and that's what's happened in Canada is that they put a very ill-worded law, which is now problematic for them because it actually, listening to one of the people in the parliament was saying that it now discriminates the LGBTQ because it's, you know, how it's worded has far-reaching effects. So this is what you find that wherever the bans have been, whether it's Australia, Germany, Canada, US, everyone's got a different definition of what this conversion therapy is, because they obviously haven't cited a research, or they haven't, you know, kind of done their,
they just cite position papers.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, you know, kind of I'm studying counseling at the moment, and there's very few cases where counseling enters law, as in therapy enters law. There's very, very few cases. And the one they refer to is like really old, like in the 70s or the 80s, whenever we're, you know, going through it. And this would perhaps be the most recent effect of therapy entering into law, because therapy in its essence, even they signed this memorandum in the UK, Memorandum of Conversion Therapy, which is like a political statement by a lot of these parties. But even in the memorandum, it states you can't prefer one sexuality over the other. So in that statement, if you're doing gay affirmative therapy, that's against the
Yeah,
you know, that's
obviously.
so it's an affirming approach, but they don't you know, they don't see it like that. They say, oh, okay, anything which is you know, if, for example, if we say the rainbow covers everything which is non-heterosexual, for example, if we say that, then we say, okay, we fall in that category as well. We have the attractions, but we don't we don't act on them, or we have a moral compass or whatever, we're working towards the attractions, and we fall in that as well. But then, has this population ever been surveyed? Has people who are struggling with it, don't identify with a sexual identity as such, has there been a survey for that? So I think that study would be definitely very, very interesting. And like I say, going through peer review and going through the diligence, that'd be something to look out for.
Yeah, that's like a point that Christopher Doyle makes. He refers to people with unwanted same-sex attraction as the U. Yeah, so or Q and U. So Q for questioning and U, like questioning goes both ways. Like questioning, should I consider myself gay, or should I try to pursue heterosexuality? But the LGBT movement just looks at questioning as questioning heterosexuality, and so they only see it one way. It's all ideologically driven. So we got to fight to preserve the right for people to pursue normative sexuality as much as we can, but at the same time, my prediction, even though I fear this, is that we're going to learn this lesson the hard way. And it'll be after we've gone, this LGBT movement has gone so far that they've affirmed everything, and we just enter a state of sexual chaos, that people start realizing, maybe we should start putting up some standards and making it so people can actually get the therapy they want to get back to like some norms.
Well, you're seeing that already in some countries where they're saying, no, we're not, or where they're opposing a lot of it, we were seeing that in the UK with Stonewall being, kind of, which is the main charity which brought the memorandum together, which a lot of the government bodies are leaving because of its extreme views on transgender issues, where it's saying that, for you to be inclusive, you need to allow men into women's bathrooms and things like that, which is like an extreme kind of view, which doesn't reflect where the law is at least. So it's almost Stonewall's a lobbyist group. It's not a government organization as such. So I think we are slowly seeing signs of people saying, hang on, we had recently the case of, I don't know if you saw Maya Forrester.
Maya Forrester, yeah.
In that. So I think slowly people are kind of seeing that, because even from a secular perspective, you can't, whenever they say conversion therapy, why don't they talk about gay affirmative therapy, because that's conversion in a sense, as well, because you're the therapist has a preconceived notion of what healthy sexuality looks like. So
literally, in some cases, they're encouraging the client to abandon their faith and adopt one that's more gay affirming. So that is like kind of definition
that's
conversion,
isn't it? So
it's not objective. It's decidedly not objective. Like if you look at the research, you look at authors who promote gay affirmative treatment, they'll be open and honest and say, no, this is not an objective. We think this issue is so important that you shouldn't be objective. and that you should try to persuade the client to adopt a particular worldview on this issue. So that sure sounds like imposing your worldview on the client.
Absolutely. And I think in the case of children where, you know, at least in the UK, when they're seen in the Tavistock clinic, where people have been, you know, affirmed, oh, okay, you can change the gender, and then they have then said, oh, you know, this isn't something that we want to do later on in life. And then they've realized being affirming of what a child wants, you know, because they have gender dysphoria at that time, is not the most healthy, you know, surgery. I can't believe surgery is the first step in addressing gender dysphoria, you know, in some of these clinics. So
It's a shame it took us the trans issue for us to start waking up to this a bit. I wish it would have been the homosexuality issue. We started waking up to it, being like, you know, let's start investigating this. Let's get the facts first before we start condemning a therapy or treatment approach that we actually don't know much about.
Absolutely, yeah.
So.
No, absolutely, yeah. Conscious of time as well. We've gone a little bit over. You okay to take one more question?
Yeah,
That's
sure.
Fine. The question is, what is the first step you would advise to take up for the person dealing with SSA? How does one fight with the constant internal conflict he has, and does marriage help in dealing with this?
Okay. First step, well, kind of went over that earlier with just seeking help, and I would say avoid falling into self-condemnation over this. Understand that this is an experience you're having. You didn't choose to have the attractions. It's your choice in how you address it. But I look at people who they when they act out, it just, to them it makes sense to act out because they don't understand where the attraction is coming from. So when they choose to identify as gay, I look at it as, okay, they're making to them what seems like a logical conclusion because this is pervasive. It's an experience I've had for so many years. They're not informed of other ways of looking at the issue. So I would say it's an ill-informed conclusion to come to. So I would say don't fall into a trap of condemning yourself for having had the attractions. Recognize it as an attraction, as an experience, but not your identity. This is not who you are. There's not a gene that forces you to then unite sexually with someone of the same sex. Okay, this is not, you're not destined for this. But also start with the realization that the feelings, the desires, the attractions may persist to some degree or another throughout life. That in itself is not a sin. It's not something that that you are ultimately the cause of. So take a bit of a comfort and assurance in that this is an experience you're having. It's not a sentence and it's not a condemnation. And so we want to reduce the fear of looking at this issue. So I would say, as far as first steps go, that would be my first step, is just understand this is an experience you're having. This is not an act you're committing. You didn't ask for these thoughts or desires. These are signs. So I would say look at them as with an approach of curiosity. This is the question that the gay affirmative therapist, just as well as the fundamentalist therapist or counselor or pastor or religious leader, won't do. With the therapy approach that we do with reintegrative therapy is we make a distinction between the two extremes. You got the gay affirmative approach, which looks at, oh, your attraction is a sign of who or what you are. And so they're going to just encourage you to embrace it and live it out in some way. Okay. And also then try to convince your family and loved ones to accept it and embrace it as well, and then get society at large to embrace it. All right. So that's the gay affirmative approach. The anti-gay approach is to just, nope, you got to stuff it down. You need to suppress the feelings. You need to force the behaviors to change. And that may be one that we're likely to lean toward because it may seem consistent with our worldview and our religious values, but ultimately isn't addressing what's underlying the attractions. And so we're taking more of a mindful approach where if you're experiencing the attractions, we're going to be like, have an approach of curiosity. Why am I having these attractions? Gay firm approach is just going to, and sometimes the fundamentalist approach, because I see this in the Christian world as well, they'll just assume, well, it's just something you have. It's just you're born with it, and they don't really look deeper into it. And so they're just like, well, you're born with it, so you either embrace it or you try to suppress it. And I would say that's too simplistic. What's underneath it? What was going on before you noticed the attraction? What emotional state were you in? What other desires do you think might be underneath there? Any emotional wounds? Just develop an approach of curiosity to it, not condemning yourself for having them, but just curious. And that's an approach that will lead toward healing, towards self-compassion. So I hope that helps. That helps as far as a first step.
Absolutely, yeah. And what would you say about marriage?
Oh yeah, the marriage. Yeah, no, I would not look at marriage as like a cure. Look at marriage as a goal to get to. Also, still that fundamentalist approach would be like just deny you have the attraction, suppress them, and try to get married, as if marriage will then be the cure. And that's like a recipe for having a really terrible marriage, because you want the marriage to come out of a place of genuine desire for your spouse. So I would just try to be patient with yourself. Don't try to force anything to happen yet.
Yeah, and I think that's something which is we see quite a lot in our Muslim community, perhaps maybe even the Christian community, because the only permissible way to engage in sexual relations is in the bounds of marriage, and then people think, okay, obviously well-intended people around them think, okay, this person probably has too much sexual energy because they don't understand what the SSA is, for example, right? And then they're like, okay, this person needs to get married.
There's an outlet. You need a place to put that sexual energy.
Yeah. And we have this in that, when people come to us and I say, okay, have you done any self-awareness work, and I think the other question which comes in is like, can I not tell my spouse, in a sense, and one of the things that we kind of say is when you're married, there's no cover, right? So you can't hide stuff. It doesn't work. You can't realistically live two lives, and if you are, you're probably not, I don't know what your marriage is, but it's not something which is truthful. And what we kind of tell people is to, when you reach that point that you can, you're ready to engage in an opposite sex relationship, that you share where you're at with the, you don't have to tell everything, but you have to kind of tell, where am I physically at in terms of this? And it's okay to say, you know what, I want to take things slow, for example, at the start, because this is something which is difficult for me, or I have issues around intimacy, because I've seen a lot of cases where, because it's not been discussed before the marriage, both parties have different expectations of what intimacy is, or what, and then that doesn't get kind of addressed. And in very religious circles, it's almost like, get them married, in a sense. I don't know if you've seen that or if,
Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I see that a lot. I work with several Muslim clients right now, and so that one guy was divorced because he thought the marriage would be
Oh
a
God,
solution
yeah.
or something. Um, he also didn't get to know his wife very well before they got married. They courted a little bit,
Mm,
and she was totally different during the courtship, and then when they got married, she was totally different. So that's uh, there needs to be some degree of authenticity and really getting to know the person well beforehand. And I got another guy that I'm working with who he's he started dating a woman while we were in therapy together, and he was like, should I break up with her? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm not going to tell you either way. Just let's make sure the reason you're not with her or breaking up with her isn't out of shame.
mm,
And like, and also, if you did have the genuine attraction to her, is she the type of girl that you would like to be with? And he was like, yeah, actually. I'm like, okay, so take your time with it, maybe. And so that's what he landed on. He's like, he was honest with her that he's working on some issues. He didn't share everything with her, but they're going to take it slow. And so, okay, maybe that'll be a good way for us to work through some of the assertiveness issues and some of the anxiety about being vulnerable with a woman. You have someone that you can actually kind of use as an example for things like, can I actually be authentic with this woman I'm dating? Or like just keep it from getting too serious yet if you're not sure where it's going. I would say once you're at the point where the relationship is getting serious, it's best for her to be aware of the issue. But that means also the whole community needs to have a degree of understanding about what same-sex attraction is.
mm,
And if we got guys who are dealing with this issue who are growing in that understanding, but the community at large doesn't understand, that's going to be really a challenge to share that with your potential spouse,
mm,
or if you're already married, share it with your spouse, because she's just going to look at it as, oh, you just have too much lust. I'm not enough for you. You don't really love me, or so it's a community-wide change that needs to happen. We see this in the Christian community as well. So it's just
mm,
a lot of misinformation out there, and so the woman needs to be prepared as well to better understand this issue, to make it
no,
safe for you to share with her.
yeah, no, definitely. Well, no, thanks. Thanks
Yeah, we
so
tried
much.
to shoot for shorter, and I'm afraid I went long with my story at the beginning.
No, I think your
But
answers have been very detailed, and I like that, And I watch, and I think the viewers, is one of them, noted today as a fan of your YouTube channel and your posts and so on. And it's really good to have. There's so many topics where the media is just, it's just one-sided. You don't really see the other side. So it's
yeah,
always good to kind of, your platform gives that voice, that for the community.
yeah, I
uh,
can say there's no one else making videos like mine.
exactly, yeah. I'm like, what why not?
Yeah,
And I think it's really good because it puts, I think there's a fear that, oh, because if I have the minority view, then I'm gonna get lynched, or something like that. But what you find is that when people start listening, and people have the capability to see both perspectives, and then people can see, oh, okay, this is just another perspective. And I think, a lot of people appreciate people who have that courage, like yourself, to speak out and say, hang on, um, this isn't right. And kind of, we have, even in our faith, we have the duty to speak out against oppression, to speak out against injustice. which is being done. So no, I salute you in your efforts for that, and kind of protecting protecting people, protecting the clients, protecting the people that you're seeing from what can only be described as discrimination, in professionally for these people in getting help. So no, and how and I know a lot of people will now ask me about how do we get hold of Andy.
Yeah. Well, you can reach me on YouTube. Just jump in my comments there. You can email me, mr.andrew.rod@gmail.com. So I every now and then I get someone who contacts me, wants to do counseling with me, and I let them know my availability is limited right now, but I try to accommodate when I get someone who's really serious about it. So that's one way to contact me. I'm on Facebook as well. You can just look for Andrew Rodriguez Counseling Services, and I might change the name of that to just be the same thing as my YouTube channel at some point. I'm not sure yet. But yeah, I'm on YouTube. I'm also on Parler, Odyssey, Locals. I'm trying to be on multiple platforms because
yeah,
at
you
any
don't know
moment I can
which
get
one
booted.
they're going to shut down.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Oh man, also here in the U.S. tomorrow is Father's Day, so I just want to say Happy Father's Day to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we went on a trip now, and then they were saying, "Oh, it's my first Father's Day," so it just whooshes by. You don't realize it, but yeah, no, thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks for that. Yeah, and again, thanks for your time. A lot of the questions asked really well, and I know some people are gonna go through the recording. The YouTube channel name is Psychobible. And so hopefully, I think if you put that in Google and put YouTube, you should be able to research, find it. Yes, I'd like to thank Andrew for his time, for his very deep share at the start. I really liked the story. I haven't heard it. At first I thought it was going to be like maybe 5 minutes, but no, it was intense.
I love sharing that story.
But
I
there
know
was
it can be
so
long,
much.
but
There was so much in that story. I think all of us were just captivated and thinking, oh, what's the next turn? And I think it shows God's work in this, isn't it? You can see things are not just, they're not chances or they're not coincidences. So I think it's really beautiful what you shared. So no, thanks. And that's been my highlight from the webinar is hearing that. It's amazing and grateful you could share that. So for next webinar, we have a similar theme. We have a Q&A. So hopefully you can join us for that as well. And for now, inshallah, God bless, and Assalamu alaikum.
All right. Take care, guys. It was my honor. Take care.